Luis, ¿me corta el 1, porfa?
Vale, ya voy a empezar en breve, ¿eh?
Abre.
Hola, hola, hola,
Vale.
hola. ¿Se oye?
¿Escucha o no? ¿Hola? ¿Se oye? ¿Sí? ¿Hola? ¿Hola, hola? ¿Sí? ¿Se oye? Venga. Hola, ¿Yolanda?
¿Qué tal?
Elena. Encantada.
Oye, ¿sabes que no he recibido tu...?
Sí, pero es que, porque como lo he hecho...
Sí, está probando un momentito. Guay. Vale.
¿Vale? Perfecto.
Nosotros cortamos y
Venga.
Cuando gusten, ¿eh? Con. Sí, por favor. Bueno, estimados ponentes, alumnos y profesorado, nos encontramos reunidos para realizar las primeras jornadas de migraciones sobre el marco de la Agenda 2030. Esto ha sido posible bajo una iniciativa de 2 distintos proyectos de innovación docente que se ha llevado a cabo dentro de la asignatura de Migraciones y la asignatura de Medio Ambiente y Sostenibilidad. No me voy a liar mucho, ahora voy a hacer un poco la presentación breve en inglés. Given that we have so many of our audiences speaks English, I'm going to do the brief presentation. Welcome everyone to the first meeting of our migration conference in the framework of the 2030 agenda, right? Development agenda. We have these conference, as most of you know, came around by 2 different types of projects that came about from the migrations class and the sustainability class, from 2 projects that were led by Yolanda and myself. So I'm going to give you a brief presentation of what it is to come for the rest of the day or the rest of the evening. Each of our guest speakers has a limit of 20 to 30 minutes. We're going to be counting the time, given that we have a little bit of a time constraint. Then, after the 3 presentations, we're going to have a brief Q&A, so you can answer your questions, ask your questions and answers, right? Then we're going to go down to evaluate your posters, see your presentations, right? They're going to come with us, help us evaluate you, and look at your research posters since you've worked so hard for them, okay? After that, we're going to break for lunch, and then we're going to invite you to see, is there going to be an afternoon session of posters in the end? To be determined. Okay, to be determined. So 2 of our presentations are going to be in English, and 1 of our presentations is going to be in Spanish, right? Perfect. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. His name is Alvar Sanchez Calvo. Alvar Sanchez is a Jesuit who studied education, psychopedagogy, and theology. He worked in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and South Sudan with the Jesuit Refugee Service, where he coordinated the educational intervention in favor of displaced persons, refugees, and the local population. He is currently the project promoter at the Diocesan Delegation of Migration in Nador, Morocco. His team coordinates different interventions in favor of the most vulnerable populations. They conduct humanitarian interventions in the northern border of Morocco, and they work from a preventing perspective in Guinea-Conakry and Senegal to reduce the risk linked to irregular immigration through awareness campaigns and community development actions. The Diocesan Delegation of Migration is also engaged in the development and dissemination of aid application in the southern border with Morocco and Spain. This application allows forcibly displaced people to obtain up-to-date information about the services available to each country through their mobile phones. So without further ado, I give Alvar welcome.
Thank you so much. And I think the Spanish goes for me.
Yep.
No, yes, go.
No, the presentation, you're in English.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you so much for this moment. Thank you for being here. I'll try to share with you some insights about our experience of the intervention in the southern border. We are in the side of Morocco. You know that this southern border is a meeting point, a common land for different cultures. Maghreb, European, Sub-Saharan. In this border, you know, coexist diverse languages, Arabic, French, Tamazight, Spanish, and different religions. In terms of migration, Morocco is a country of origin, transit, and destination, with more than 5 million people, citizens in diaspora. Morocco, you know, plays a key role between Africa and Europe. La Stratégie nationale d'immigration et asile is the migration policy framework in the country, and it defends a management of migration based on the respect of human rights and highlights the opportunities and benefits of migration, which is wonderful. However, despite this positive framework, people, you know, are prevented, sometimes with violence, from trying to access Spain territory. Why? Why? Border externalization is the answer. Border externalization in practice means that individuals, especially migrants and asylum seekers, are exposed to border controls long before they actually reach European territory. The southern border is also a corridor towards Western Europe. We see the West and the North Africa routes converge in Morocco. Where do these people come from? We have people from Middle East, Syria, Palestine, Yemen, from Sub-Saharan Africa, Guinea, Conakry, Mali, Ivory Coast, also from the Maghreb region, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia. They put their lives at risk to progress on their migratory project. Spain is the main gate to Europe for irregular migration. Spain counted 41,000 entries in 2020, compared to the 32,000 in 2018, and this represents an approximate growth of 30% compared to the previous year. In 2020, Spain was the European country with the most asylum applications, 84,000, the majority from Venezuela, Colombia, Honduras. What are the causes of displacement in the sub-Saharan countries of West Africa? Well, you already know about the instability and conflict and war. Let me focus briefly on food insecurity. Food insecurity is one of the most pressing challenges faced by many countries on the continent. In 2020, and this is too much, more than 100 million Africans faced food insecurity. And that is an increase of 60% over the previous year. You know about the impact of environmental change. Several regions in Africa will experience an average plus 2 degrees Celsius warming over the next 2 decades. What is the main livelihood of local communities? Agriculture. So you know that 70% of the African population lives out from agriculture. And this warming will have a direct impact on the access of food of millions of people. At the same time, Africa emits only the 4% of greenhouse emissions. And here we have a rampant issue of environmental justice, or let's say injustice. So we know why we talk about forced migration. We talk about violence, we talk about the effects of the climate change, we talk about hunger. So we understand that in the country of origin, in the countries of origin, people, they are victims and they need to flee their countries. But what we are not used to understand is that these victims fail also in transition countries, in the countries of transition. In 2019, nearly 900 people died or disappeared on their way to Spain. In 2020, the border claimed more than 2,000 lives. And the first semester this year, the increase of death rate shot up by 526% compared to last year. In Nador, where we live, close to Melilla, the European migration policies of externalization and border control have militarized our context, pushing migrant communities to the southern cities. What is the consequence? People putting their lives at risk in the most dangerous route, the Canary Island. Currently, the Canary Island route is on fire. Despite being the most lethal way to reach Europe, more than half of the newcomers last year took this route. So we share the question, are European policies somehow responsible in this humanitarian drama? What we can share is that some months ago, well, actually June 2019, the International Criminal Court received a legal submission calling for the EU and some of its member states to face prosecution for enacting migration policies intended to sacrifice the lives of migrants in distress at sea. According to the ICC submission, these crimes against humanity, because they talk about deaths by drowning of thousands of migrants, the refoulement of tens of thousands of migrants, the complicity in crimes of deportation, torture, enslavement, and other inhuman acts taking place in detention camps, were perpetrated by the European Union and member states in the belief that sacrificing migrant lives at sea would stop other migrants from crossing the Mediterranean. Frontex has become the central pillar of EU control border. Frontex will have in 2027 more than 10,000 border and coast guards with an annual budget 19 times higher than when the agency was created. Last year, Frontex was accused of complicity in forcing back asylum seekers in breach of international law. What about home? What about centros de internamiento de extranjeros, centros de estancia temporal de inmigrantes, centros de atención temporal? Well, judge by your own. The official stand says that CIEs are not penitentiary service, since the irregular entry of the foreigner in the territory does not fall under the penal code. So they committed no crime, nor had any conviction. Nevertheless, the foreigner is retained. They say not detained, okay? Not is retained, not detained, in a preventive manner, okay? So good, but beyond this official stand, the NGOs and the civil society claim that CIEs, CETI, actually are kind of prison, but without the constitutional regulation that protect prisons. Actually, they detain people who have not committed any crime. The sum of reports denouncing poor conditions of the detention centers and the lack of respect for fundamental rights is overwhelming. You already know. You may have read a lot of them. They talk about lack of interpreters, lack of legal assistance, arbitrary regime of visits, abuses, mistreatment. What is the number of migrants under administrative irregularity in Spain? Well, we could count around 500,000, 600,000 people. Almost 4 out of 5 come from Central and South America. The whole of the African continent represents not even the 10% this is around 43,000 people of the migrants in administrative irregularity situation in Spain. And all of them, no, half of them, they come from a single country, which is Morocco. So what is the people we actually find in the detention centers? We only see Africans, meaning that migrant workers and forced displaced people from one continent are tolerated, and migrant workers and other forced displaced people from other continents are punished. And that is why the Human Rights Observatory of the University of Barcelona stated that these centers are unconstitutional because people are detained for who they are and not for what they have done. What is the contribution of migratory projects? The dynamics of migration over the last 2 decades in Spain are really, really interesting. The graph here reveals that migratory flow to Spain is inversely proportional to the dynamism of economy expressed in relation to unemployment rates. You see here, less unemployment, this was before the crisis. Less unemployment, which means more demand for labor, means more immigration. And the more unemployment, this is after the crisis, the more unemployment, the less migration. Okay, migration goes down, employment goes up. Conclusion, job opportunities at destination modulate the integration of migrants into the labor market. Researchers from the French National Center for Scientific Research analyzed the impact of the arrival of migrants on a series of economic categories. The work was published in the scientific journal Science Advances, and it shows how refugees contribute to host communities. The study analyzes 30 years of data from the main European countries, included Spain, and it reveals that migrants in general and asylum seekers in particular have a positive effect on gross domestic product, taxes, and even jobs. The study confirms a dominant idea among economists. It is that migration has positive effects, and other reasons far from economic rationality are fueling rejection. What are these reasons? So we are here to answer to this question. Let's have a look at what is the extent of our socio-economic need for migrants' contribution. Different demographic studies by the United Nations, the Wittgenstein Center, and the Center for Global Development state that the EU will need tens of millions of workers to survive in the coming decades, and will not have them unless it stops being a fortress against migration. Literally, I read, it will not be enough to extend the age of retirement or motivate the integration of more women into the labor market or increase the birth rate of our societies, nor will it be enough to robotize the productive economy or to continue relocating jobs. None of this will save Europe from an aging population, the report adds. So that is why studies, they are wondering, can Africa help Europe avoid its looming aging crisis? Only immigration can correct the imbalance, and those of African origin will be the one that most naturally will be able to provide the necessary labor to keep growth. Africa is the youngest country, the youngest continent, 60% of its inhabitants are under 25 years of age. And however, only 19% of these young people have a job. So dear students, how could we explain the nonsense of what is currently going on the southern border. You read that Germany finds no migrants to drive its trains and trams. Ireland lacks a skilled workforce in construction. The UK has stopped harvesting crops due to the lack of seasonal workers. And the same has happened in Italy. Why our societies or policies refuse this human capital? I think we have 1 minute time or 2 minutes time before finishing this presentation. It would be great if you could discuss in pairs about the reasons why our societies, because this is a common issue in all European countries, they defend, they refuse, okay, this human capital. What is your hypothesis? Why do we act like this? We give some seconds thinking. It is important, come on. You understand what we did, isn't it? We watched the situation. We had a look at the situation. Good, thank you so much. So this is important too, okay? Afterwards, to go to the debate and to put questions. So the fact is that, well, this is just my guess. Of course, maybe it's wrong.
Sina kanisa. Sina kanisa nazana putina nazana mukili. Nazana mukili po na sala oyo nzambe atina wana sala na mukili. Parce que na mukili mutu azwana mission na nzambe atindela ye. Ngape nazana mukili po na mission na ngai me nzambe nda yebi. Ngana ebe ononte.
So everybody has a mission. This kid has a mission, and we also have a mission as university and as students. The issue is to understand why some dynamics that put people's life at risk are at this moment, you know, blessing the border. So the fact is that there is an economic interest. This is clear. This is clear. Many millions are on the table at this moment when we talk about border control. And also, it seems to be that there is a political interest. You know, and we know that the rise of populist parties in all European countries is the defensive reaction of societies that do not want to see the world to come. And the European Parliament has warned that the older and more isolated a community is, the more radical it becomes. And there are political positions that capitalize on this phenomenon. We do claim that police officers and security forces appointed to border control do not use violence to dissuade migrants from their migratory project. And we also claim that investment in border control should be at least proportional to investment in democratization and improved governance in the countries of origin. Why? Because we need organized states to promote an efficient management of human mobility. Also, we need collaborative initiatives to respond to the challenges of human mobility, and we are urged to promote networking as a means to improve our intervention. And advancing network initiatives is an important step, and this is somehow what we are doing here today. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Alvar, por esa intervención. I was thanking our presenter for such a great presentation. Hopefully you all enjoyed it, and since you had 2 minutes to talk among yourselves, we're going to expect those questions to come at the end, though. We're not going to leave you off the hook. So now I'm going to present our second presenter of the day. She is Dr. Elena Jimenez. Y voy a hacer la presentación en español. En la actualidad, la doctora Elena Jimenez es asesora y responsable del área de Migraciones e Igualdad de Trato del Defensor del Pueblo en España. Se incorporó a la institución en el 2007. Fue abogada en ejercicio durante 12 años y miembro de la Junta del Gobierno del Ilustre Colegio de Abogados de Córdoba. También fue profesora de la Escuela de Práctica Jurídica de dicha corporación durante varios cursos. Formó parte de la Subcomisión de Extranjería del Consejo General de la Abogacía Española, donde desarrolló labores formativas y realizó misiones de evaluación. Y también tuvimos la fortuna de que fue profesora asociada en la Universidad Loyola Andalucía entre los años 2016 y 2019, ¿correcto? La doctora Elena es doctora en Derecho por la Universidad de Málaga, titulada en 2016, donde el título de su tesis fue Menor y extranjero, dos lógicas enfrentadas, de las cuales han surgido varias publicaciones extensas en el tema. Sin más, todo tuyo.
Okay, thank you. After this awesome presentation Alvar has just given to us, I am really ashamed of what I am going to do because I don't have the time to make a proper presentation, so I am really sorry for that, but I am going to do my best. I don't know if I begin. I wait.
Vamos a cambiar la presentación. Ahora.
No.
No. La otra.
So, just in the meantime, as you are going to see, it's an Spanglish presentation, not only for what I am going to tell you, but also for what you are going to read. But I am going to do my best to try to be easier for you to understand. Alvar has already put the focus on the general framework of the migration, and I am going to try you to wear a different glasses to see how the most vulnerable people, that are children and also women in such extent, but I am going to center in children, is the most vulnerable people inside of this migration flows in the southern border, but are the most invisible. And this is a great challenge for the system, how these people who should be the one who are more protected are the one who are the most invisible. So again, I am using the same map as Alvar. I don't know if you who are not Spaniards are so aware of what is this border, what that is mean. I know all of you know about it, but it's important to explain. The down part of the photograph is Africa, and the other part is Andalusia. So in one part of this border is such only 14 kilometer distance. This is very near of what we are going now in Córdoba, and the other part is Morocco. So watching this border, this is the question I propose you. Do today's migrant children have a right to have rights? Again, I don't know if I am going to give you 2 minutes for that, as Alvar has done before, because I am sure that all of you are thinking, of course they have. And this is, for me, the great challenge, to explain how all these international conventions who are guaranteed rights to children, we say that they are our patrimony, that children are the patrimony of the humanity. And when you face the situation of a migrant children, you see how difficult it is to maintain that in the reality. Migrant children are migrants before being children. And for that, we ask that question. Do today's migrant children have a right to have rights? The last report of UNICEF about children, that is very recent, 2020 figures, said that more girls and boys than ever are on the move now, with 35.5 million having lived outside the country of birth in 2020, and an additional 23.3 million displaced internally. So see, we are going to a huge amount of children on the move now, and it is quite important to think about it, because normally when we see this photograph, when we see the news in general, we only see young, healthy men who are trying to flee their countries, and we forget about this other photograph that normally, due to this strange concept of respecting data protection, they try not to show us these children images. But also, as Alvar has already said before, perhaps we have to think why these media want not to show us these children images. Because perhaps if they show us the vulnerability of the people who try to flee their countries to find a better life, perhaps they are not going to make the public to be afraid of them. When we see of this huge amount of young people, young men, healthy men, a lot of people feel a bit afraid about, oh, these people is coming here, they are invading us. But perhaps if they show us this reality, perhaps our reaction as a society would be another one. So I think we have to think about this reality. Also, you know that the Global Compact for Migration, there are several objectives for safe, orderly, and regular migration, and I am going to focus in 4 of the points of this Global Compact for Migration under the child perspective, inviting you to wear the glasses of children perspective when we talk about migration. So I have chosen these 4 objectives of the Global Compact: ensure that all migrants have proof of legal identity and adequate documentation. This is one of the objectives of the Global Compact. The 7th is address and reduce vulnerabilities in migration. The 10th, prevent, combat, and eradicate trafficking in persons in the context of international migration. And the 13th, use migration detention only as a measure of last resort and work towards alternative. This is not only what NGO says, but what the countries has make a global compromise to fulfill, to deal with migration in another way. So I think we have to be in mind this focus. This is very recent. You know that Global Compact for Migration is now one of the main tools the countries have decided to have as a framework to deal with migration issues in the countries. For me, which are the big challenges we have when we face the reality of this huge amount of children on the move? The first one, the capacity of child protection system to include gender-responsive services and alternative care options to immigration detention. I am going to focus on the girls, because if it is difficult to see photographs of children on the move, it's nearly impossible to have a word about girls on the move. And for that, I am talking of gender perspective also. At the same time, we wear the glasses of this children perspective, because I think that we have to be very aware of that. There are thousands of girls that are on the move, but they are not being not identified as children because they think they look like older than they are. And also because in some places, it's better for them saying that they are adults and not girls. The second one is the capacity of frontline actors to detect children on the move suffering from or at risk of any kind of violence. I am not going only to talk about gender violence, that of course is one of the focus we have to be on, but also other kind of violence. It is very difficult for a girl to be identified as a victim of violence if they don't know what is the correct question we have to ask her. Being mutilated genital mutilation in this country of Africa we are receiving a lot of migrants of, is like a, I don't know how to say, I don't like to say a normal thing for them, because it's not normal for no one, but I mean, if you don't ask the proper question, it's quite different. They are going to answer that they are suffering for this kind of violence, so that if this kind of violence remains hidden, it's going to be very difficult for us to protect them. For that, it's very important that actors who are working in the borders are aware of this kind of violence in the countries of origin. And also, and for me, it's like the main challenge we have in a context like that, the university, being able to talk about lessons learned and best practices, because it's not true that nothing works. We are doing a lot of good things in little places. People are changing a lot of things in the south and also here. So it's very important for the university to identify these best practices and to spread them and to share with other people. I think for me today is like my challenge to talk to you about these things that really works. But after that, I have to focus on what is not going on properly. So as I told you before, I am going to focus on girls because they often experience multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination, that they are not only based on their gender, that is what is evident, but also migration status, age, race, ethnicity, disability, pregnancy, religion, sexual orientation, also in girls, and gender identity. All these things, if you are not wearing the proper glasses, you are not going to see it. And if you are not able to identify these vulnerabilities, you are not going to be able to protect. We are not going to be able to protect. So sorry, because it's now the Spanish time. I am going to try to translate quickly. This is 3 points I think we are able to focus in if we wear the correct glasses. First of all, lack of identification of this group of children, especially vulnerable, that is trafficking victims. The second point is what is the role. I have just talked about the role of children protection system. And the third one, how it is difficult for these trafficking victims, children trafficking victims, to be also recognized as in international protection needs. This mix between being a trafficked child and having international protection needs, meaning asylum seekers, is so difficult because it remains under this first contact the agent have with them, that is she or he is an irregular migrant. And it's very difficult for them to see all these vulnerabilities they have. In the first point, that is the one I am trying to focus very quickly, is why we are not able to identify these children who are trafficking victims, for 2 main reasons. First, age assessment procedure, and the lack of a specific protocol to check quickly that this teenager that appear to be older than really they are is a real child to be identified. Talking about trafficking, if we say trafficking in general, always nearly all of us think about sexual exploitation. That, of course, it's a kind of trafficking, but it's not all the kind of trafficking. So it's very important wearing glasses, but the correct one. And again, when you face the first interview with a girl or with a boy, if you only ask questions to check if he or she is a victim of sexual exploitation, you are going to not to focus on the real exploitation. Perhaps he or she is suffering. We are talking about begging, we are talking about labor exploitation, about serving at like domestic workers, or even these girls and boys that are moved around Europe to commit petty crimes. Also, this is not only the sorry, ONU, no me sale en inglés, United Nations, United Nations organization, the one who is focused on that, but also this Greta committee, that is the committee of the Council of Europe, has a specific convention on trafficking, focus on the protection of the victims, the Protocol of Warsaw, and this protocol is a very interesting way of the following of this convention, because in each country of Europe, this group of experts come to the country and check if the country is already fulfilling or not the convention. And for Spain, this is one of the last part of the slide, is what Greta has said to Spain. It is important to focus on this group of children that has not been registered when they come to Europe, who are in the street, of course, and focus on this group of children who are under this irregular administrative situation. So it's a call for the countries, European countries, to check among these migrant children potential victims of trafficking. But it's so important, if you want these children are being identified quickly, you have to do it with personnel who is really specialized on children question. It is not so normal. If they are placed on the system of protection system, they are going to be taken care by personnel who is not used to migration question, only to protection, and by the other way, if they are going to be treated as adults, they are going to deal only with personnel who is prepared to deal with migration questions. So it's for that, for what in all Europe is so difficult to have real figures of how many children are there in Europe being trafficked and properly identified. The other question I told you at the beginning is the age assessment. This is a very important situation for these teenagers who look like adults, but perhaps they are under 16, 17 or more, and they are always very difficult for all the countries to understand. Then when you believe that this person perhaps could be a victim of trafficking, you should presume that he or she is a child. It is normally not fulfilled by any country, so it's very common to find out months after they arrive irregularly in Europe, a girl or a boy who is placed, for instance, in a detention center for adults, that if he or she were identified properly at the beginning, they wouldn't find them in a detention center as we find at the end. Because the risk of the age assessment is very strong from an ethic point of view. What is the risk of getting it wrong? Trying to think about all the teenagers you know, and how difficult it is to see if he or she is 17 or 18. Imagine what it is the consequence when you are talking about that in a migrant context. You are talking about a process that cannot be so quick, because it's a process, and it's not like you are just disembarked in the boat and I am saying you 18, you 17, and the difference of choosing one of other path is sometimes impossible to arrange after. So the risk of getting it wrong is very strong in this point. And also, about age assessment, again, if we are not wearing the gender glasses that you have to wear about the same time you are wearing the children glasses, you are going to forget that it's very difficult for a girl, teenager girl, to be identified as a girl. Because in our mind, all of us